All right, and let me get that presentation shared. Oh, oops, that's not what I wanted. There we go.
Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm just going to move something out of the way here. The faces are in the way of the screen. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and happy Earth Day. We didn't actually plan that and it worked out fortuitously, although for probably a lot of us every day is really Earth Day. And I'm so thankful that you're all here to hear about the seed library. I'm actually a library faculty member at Scottsdale Community College in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm on sabbatical this year to implement this project. And next slide, please. Sorry, I forgot that I wasn't the one advancing. And so I broke down the presentation into 3 parts, and there'll be time for questions after each of the parts. The first part's really introductory, and it's talking about why is native seed important and habitat at home important, and how seed libraries can be involved in that effort. And then I'll get into how I implemented the Maricopa Native Seed Library. And then the third section will be how you can do something similar, whether it's starting a seed library from scratch or adding native seeds into an existing seed library. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start by just getting us all like kind of on the same page about what native plants are, I think, because sometimes there's confusion because part of the definition is what region are you talking about, smaller or larger. So I just want to kind of get us thinking about native plants and their importance just to kind of set the tone for everything. And 2 definitions here on the screen. You can kind of see by looking them over, there's a couple of common threads. The idea that the plant is native if it has developed or evolved in a particular location over a long period of time. And then the other idea is this idea of part of the balance of nature. And that's what's really important about native plants, is because they have evolved in a location over a long period of time, they've evolved to the conditions, the soils, the other climatic conditions in that area. And then they've also co-evolved with the other organisms in that area, everything from insects, birds, even some of the microorganisms. So you name it. So there's sort of this, this idea of this coevolution and the interrelationships in an ecosystem. And so that's going to come up a few times as we talk about some other aspects of native plants. But I just wanted to kind of get us thinking about that. And sometimes there's maybe some, I don't want to say maybe controversy is not the word, but maybe confusion about, well, what's the cutoff point for when is it native? And typically in the Americas, we say before there was any European colonization or settlement, any of the plants that were here before that point would be considered native. After that cutoff point, then you're looking at if plants were brought from other places, they're considered introduced. So, and then the other thing that sometimes maybe is, I don't want to say controversial, but confusing is about, well, what's the region? Are you gonna? It could be big or small. You could talk about native plants of North America, native plants of a certain state, of a certain county. So there's all that sort of pieces and parts that go into it. And then again, just kind of emphasizing again this idea of relationships with other native species in the ecosystem, and that'll keep coming up. And also to kind of draw a distinction between native plants and cultivars. So a native plant has not been subject to any form of artificial selection by humans, selective breeding, horticulturists, selecting for certain traits and then breeding and getting those traits in larger numbers in each subsequent generation. Native plants have not been altered. And that's another important kind of consideration compared to, you'll see a lot of, they're starting to even call them nativars in nurseries that are cultivars of native plants. And so breeders have, selected for some particular trait. And, so all the cultivars now have this particular trait, and there's lots of different cultivars, and some of them are not as beneficial to wildlife as native plants because of the alteration. Some of them either don't produce as much nectar or pollen or have other things about them that make them not as wildlife friendly. So next slide, please. And I want to talk about habitat at home because this has been one of the rationales for starting the seed library, is to really equip and inspire people to start thinking about gardening in a different way beyond just the aesthetics of the garden or what the gardener likes and likes to look at, but to actually provide for a variety of wildlife at home. And a lot of the things that kind of influenced me to go in this direction was I was looking, especially in Arizona, we've had so many problems with devastating wildfires. There's a lot of development here, drought, a lot of invasive species, and then of course climate change kind of multiplying all those threats. And so that really has been a big inspiration to get the project started. And then also hearing from Doug Tallamy in his books and some of his talks I've been at, where he's really saying our wildlands, they're fragmented, they've been diminished, they've been degraded. We need to think about the places we live differently as far as our urban and suburban and rural areas where humans are inhabiting. What we are growing around us, influences what else can live with us. So the choices that we make in the garden, what we include in our gardens, whether they're big or small, influences what can grow around us. So this example here I have of a picture on the slide is a native bee that was visiting one of my flowers just last week. And this is a larger prickly pear plant called Indian fig. And so this is an example of, if I didn't have flowering plants that attracted these bees, I wouldn't have them coming to my area, as well as other things I've done in the environment as well. So that's sort of the rationale, for the project. And I've focused on pollinators as far as what I've included in the seed library, but of course there's other wildlife values beyond pollinators as well. So that's something kind of to think about if you're thinking about building a seed library or adding native plants in. And then a lot of times, folks that I talk to in the community can get maybe intimidated or discouraged because they think they don't have a big enough space, but that's not really the case. Even a small patch or plantings on a patio can provide some habitat. So I want to kind of think broadly about, you don't have to have a lot of space. And then I'll be talking in the next couple of slides about all the reasons that native plants and habitat or home are really good for us, our families, our communities, and for wildlife as well. Next slide, please. So I'm going to offer up 5 different reasons to ponder about, the importance of native plants and habitat at home. And these can be used maybe as, talking points as you think about, talking and educating in your communities. And some may resonate with some folks more than others, depending on, things about their background and their worldview. So we'll look at these 5 different types of considerations. Next slide, please. So ecological, I touched on that a bit already. This idea that native plants are really essential to a healthy ecosystem. You can't take them out and expect the ecosystem to continue to thrive. And this is the idea that there are interconnections, there are food webs and food chains, and native plants are part of these systems that evolved over time. And there's a lot of research that shows that native plants are going to support wildlife much better than non-natives. This is an example of a monarch that emerged on my native milkweed in my yard. It was actually, I think, Christmas Day a couple of years ago, and it was really amazing. So, um, you know, these different relationships are just really important to try to preserve. Of course, we can't, we're not going to be able to restore, ecosystems in our backyard that are exactly what it used to be before development and all that, but they can have enough value, and they could be enough of a replica to allow for these organisms to be supported and thrive in our environment. And then just thinking a little more broadly, as far as all these different ecosystem services that native plants provide. Food, a lot of them are edible, not only for humans and for wildlife as well. They provide shade, water purification, and flood regulation, just to name a few of the ecosystem services when you think about native plants more broadly in ecosystems. Next slide, please. And so there's economic value too, because native plants have adapted to whatever the climatic conditions are in their area, their soils, that sort of thing. They don't require as many inputs, compared to like a lawn or non-natives. So you can save a lot of money on water, on yard maintenance, fertilizers, and pesticides by having a native landscape as opposed to non-natives. And then also, and these are some pictures here of the top is a picture of a stinknet, which is an invasive plant in Arizona, and it's creating kind of a monoculture there alongside that road versus a picture of the native Sonoran Desert habitat. And so the idea here has to do with no matter what region that you look at, most regions have some tourism value because of their natural environment, no matter where you're looking here or beyond the United States. And so this idea that the more that we can control invasives in our yards, control inputs of fertilizer, pests, all that sort of stuff, and grow natives, we're going to be able to help preserve sort of that beauty and then kind of the economy. So for folks who are thinking more economics minded, that may be a good argument, to think about how it impacts tourism. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of health benefits to including incorporating native plants in the environment. Going back to the idea of requiring less pesticides and fertilizers, that's going to be less toxins that are going to impact humans and other organisms. And then there's also a lot that can be said about benefits of nature at home. I think folks have really seen a little bit of this more with the pandemic and having to spend more time at home, that if you have a something, even if it's a small retreat, uh, you know, that has some plants, a patio even, or a small yard, there's a lot of health benefits to having habitat at home. And these include everything from effects on blood pressure, stress, mood, and the immune system. So there's a lot of benefits along that line that are just, to human specific to us to for our own health. And then as far as medicinal value, this is two plants that are native Sonoran Desert plants that have medicinal value that haven't really even been fully utilized, as far as being incorporated into um, mainline, sign medicine, I guess I should say. But so there's a lot of plants that maybe they haven't been fully explored for their medicinal value. So by preserving them, we're also helping to preserve the possibility of future medicines. And then getting more philosophical, we can argue that native plants have intrinsic value. We've talked about some of their extrinsic values as far as economics or the services they provide, but they have value in and of themselves. And so there could be an argument there, just philosophically, that they should be conserved because of that value. And then going another step further, if you look at spiritual traditions across time and space, there's really a common thread of some valuing of nature and interconnectedness. So by creating habitat at home, it's kind of honoring those traditions if you follow any of those traditions. So that's just kind of another way to think about it more broadly. And then once you have these kind of spaces, they're great places for spiritual practices. So just some various, thinking as broadly and expansively as I can about native plants and their values. I think I have one more point to ponder. Next slide, please. And that's aesthetics and a sense of place. So really what I'm talking about here is each region of the country has sort of its own iconic plants and a sense of place that comes from that, that lets you know that you're in somewhere unique. There's a lot of in our culture we say, oh well, all the different areas are starting to look the same. They have the same big box stores and the same strip malls. Everything looks the same, the cookie cutter houses. But when you look at what's the plant assemblage in that area, there's something usually unique to that region. And that's kind of another idea, is we want to preserve that sense of place, that uniqueness in our region. Next slide, please. So as far as seed libraries and native plants, seed libraries are typically in traditional brick and mortar libraries, not always, but very typically. And so I think seed libraries are a great avenue to increase native plants in the community because they're accessible to the public. People are already coming to libraries for other things, so they can even have a chance encounter with your seed library. The seeds are typically free in a seed library, so there's not a barrier in terms of cost. So it kind of addresses some equity issues there. And then there's so many of our values as librarians that align to this whole idea of native plants and habitat at home, along with access, equity, sustainability, of course, and lifelong learning, because gardening is very much a lifelong learning um, endeavor. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, where I see that kind of connection. And I think we might be at our first question piece. Should I go ahead if folks have questions in the chat window, and I can navigate over to the chat? Let's see. Where did you buy your seeds? So I'll be talking about how I implemented the seed library in the next segment, but I'll say that I've been collecting them myself and getting a little bit of donations, but primarily collecting myself. What consideration have you heard patrons report most often? They often ask, well, which plants are easy to grow, especially from seed. A lot of folks want to know what plants are good in containers. So those are things that have come up a lot. Kristen, if I'm not quite answering your question, just maybe let me know if there's another angle on that. Oh, everything just advanced. I couldn't see. Do you recommend keeping the natives separate from the non-natives? I don't know. I really haven't done that because, well, I have also food plants that are not traditionally native to Arizona in my seed library, but I've just marked them off by categories. So I have food plant, and then I have shrub, I have perennial, I have vine, and things like that. So anything that was traditionally, I guess, non-native, I guess I've separated out in a category, but I haven't separated them physically in the seed library. Yes, I've collected them from the wild. I'll talk about that a bit more in the next segment. Right, I know the grass lawns, it is conspicuous consumption, and it's really done a lot of damage to us, I think. Oh, someone's asking about stink net. Hand pulling if the infestation is still small, if you can pull before it sets seed, that's really important. And then I think there's a certain pre-emergent that they're recommending, but I can't remember the name of it. But if you Google, I think StinkNet and Arizona Native Plant Society, they've produced a brochure on that. How much botanical and horticultural knowledge? Yeah, this has been a really interesting thing because I'm the only one that's working on the project that knows a bit about. I'm the only real gardener involved in the project, and the other folks have come along beside me are distributing seed but don't have that knowledge, so they're kind of relying on me. People do ask a lot of different questions. I'm trying to create a lot of learning objects. I've done a lot of workshops and things like that. I don't know that you have to have true training in botanical but botany or horticulture. It's helpful, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. And I've gotten by just on being a gardener and doing some learning, lifelong learning. I haven't encountered any legal obstacles at this point as far as seed sharing. Oh, there's a question about new species of tree creeping in. I don't, we've seen a lot of invasive species here in Arizona, but they're typically grasses. We haven't seen any new tree species, but definitely there's changes going on that folks are trying to document. There's also been declines in some of the species due to wildfire. There's actually an estimate from the forest, national forest, that we lost over 400,000 saguaros in the last fire that we had this summer. So those are some of the changes we're seeing. Okay, I think I've got through the questions that are there so far. Go ahead and continue to add questions, and I'll come back during this next segment. I think this segment and the next one will answer, I think, some of the other questions that came up. So I'm going to talk about, well, I think I've kind of already hit on this a bit, but just kind of reiterate some of the inspiration and purpose, and then what went into my planning and preparation, my how I've obtained and processed seed, some other elements of the project besides seed distribution, and then what we've accomplished so far. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it was in the beginning, some of those things that I was seeing, these increasing threats to wildlands have me very concerned. Actually, some of the field sites that I utilized early last summer, right around this time last summer, burned later in the summer, and I've lost some of my field sites. So that's been, even more made me want to double down on what I'm doing, because I'm saying we just lost areas I collected seed from. This is incredibly devastating. The other piece that I don't think I've talked about yet is that at the same time that I'm seeing our wildlands under threat, I'm seeing that most of the home landscapes around me are what I call inert. They have maybe a smattering of plants. They're not necessarily, quite a few of them would be non-native. And then the natives that they do have often are not very high wildlife supporting natives, so that I'm seeing like no activity going on in a lot of the yards around me. When I walk around, I don't see any bees, I don't see birds and things like that. Then I come back to my house where I've got some of these plants and there's a lot of activity going on. So I'm saying, wow, I just really want to get more folks thinking about how they can change their home landscapes a little bit. And then the other factor that really impacted this a lot too is that the more I learn about the plants in the Sonoran Desert here locally, the more I see plants that are not commercially available. And I'm just scratching my head saying, wow, these are amazing plants. Here's a picture of one, desert chia. It's an edible chia seeds. It comes up, it's an annual that comes up in the spring. And but you cannot get it commercially here. So, and there's lots of these species, so many of these species that are not available commercially. And so one of my big goals has been to get these species out into the hands of the public so they can grow them in their yards. And then again, with Doug Tallamy's ideas in his book, Nature's Best Hope, he's got sort of this concept that if we start to intentionally garden and think about what we put in our yards over time, all these landscapes can form a like a new national park at home. And he's saying it's essential to really our survival, because the wildlands just are too degraded and too fragmented. And so all these things inspired me to get seed out to people and try to give them as much as I can inspiration and education to really equip them to do some habitat at home. And I've been on sabbatical this year to do the project, so it's been sort of my full-time job. So I've been able to really get into it, maybe more so than folks may be able to at other locations, just because of being on sabbatical. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to get into some of the planning. So I actually started planning the seed library at the end of 2018, because it's that much lead time for a sabbatical. There's so many steps involved. So a lot of that went into that sort of a front-loaded planning process. And some of it even happened before that, because learning about the native plants in my region has been almost a 20-year, thing since I've lived in Arizona, slowly learning the plants. And I've used heavily the iNaturalist app as a way to help me identify plants. There's some really good botanists on there that come in and help me figure out what I'm looking at when it's not the machine learning piece isn't really kicking in. So I've been learning a lot about the native plants, and then my thought process as well. I can't possibly include every native plant in our area. What are going to be some of my criteria? So, of course, the high wildlife value piece came into play, and I started keeping a kind of a spreadsheet where I was looking at, okay, various websites to understand what's the wildlife value of the different species. I was looking at specifically pollinators. So I was looking at high value nectar plants and looking at larval host plants for butterflies and moths. I was also looking at plants that provided a lot of seed or forage, for wildlife. And then, of course, not being commercially available was important, as I mentioned earlier, to make them available, especially because I'm asking people to reach a high bar. I'm asking people to grow from seed, maybe even people that haven't done that before. So it's going to be more of an incentive when you can't get the plant any other way than growing it from seed. And then because of being in the desert and looking at climate change, I was trying to make sure, I mean, all of our species have some level of being drought and heat tolerant, but I was looking at that spectrum and trying to select ones that I thought were going to be most likely to be able to do well into the future. And then easy to grow from seed, of course, because I'm asking folks to grow from seed. So these were sort of the four criteria that I made selections on. And that doesn't mean that every plant in the seed library, there's about 45 species in the seed library that are native at this time. They don't all fit every criteria, but as I made the choices, I was kind of trying to make sure that they met at least one. And I have a kind of a rationale for every plant that I've included in the seed library, because there's a lot of intensive effort that goes into collecting them, processing them, and developing all of the educational materials. So I really wanted to be intentional about that. And so I'll show you on the next slide a picture of a plant profile where I have on the website a larger profile of the plant. But on this slide, you can see at the top where it says Parry's, penstemon, and superstition mallow. Those are dividers that I use in the seed display. So folks can quickly thumb through and see, okay, oh, it's a perennial, oh, it's easy to grow, or it's some of them are medium, some of them are difficult. And then there's little icons, there's a bee icon, a bird icon, so you can see what it supports and then a picture of the plant. So just kind of an easy visual when you thumb through. Um, and then the seed packet labels, which are down below, those have abbreviated information from the profiles. And I tried to highlight, what I thought was most important. What's the expected size of the plant? What color are the flowers and what's the bloom season? How do I germinate it? What care does it need? What wildlife value, and so on and so forth. Any cautions, like if it's poisonous, if seeds are poisonous or the plant's poisonous. And then a tiny URL that brings you back to the larger plant profile, which I'll show in a moment. So trying to make it easy as possible for folks to kind of make choices in the seed library. And then I developed a website with libguides, and I have a social media presence. And we're at currently 3 campuses in our community college district. One's doing curbside, and the other 2 have the seed library like set out on a table right at the entrance to the library, so that because they're not allowing the public all the way into the building at this time, but they can at least come and get seeds. And I did have a mail order that went on for about 5 months, but I just recently discontinued that. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a plant profile for thistle. And so I included the scientific name, the common names, including in Spanish if available, some pictures, what's the difficulty level, and then in italics is sort of my little promotional piece for each plant, trying to give it a little encapsulated, advertisement. And then in the chart, all the same kind of information that shows up in the packet, as much as I could fit on the packet label. And then a recommended use in the landscape, because my background is in gardening and most of these plants are in my yard. So I've kind of gotten to know them and their requirements and things like that. So that's a website plant profile. And then I've also got like a printed binder that's at the display that people can look at as well. Okay, next slide, please. So here's thistle again. It's one of my favorites. It's such a great high wildlife plant that people really don't have in their yards. How I've gone about collecting the seed. Now, this is a little bit unique because of my interest, my background is in biology. I was a biology teacher and I have some graduate work in biology. So I have a little bit of a background. So I was really interested in pursuing this, but I don't think everybody who's going to do a native seed library has to go this route. But I actually got a permit from the Tonto National Forest, and I've been going out and collecting out there on my hikes. And so that's been one of my big sources for seed. And then I've also been collecting on the campus garden, because we have a fantastic campus garden that has a lot of the plants that are in the seed library. I'll talk more about that later. And then my home garden. So those have been my sources. And then I've gotten just a small amount of donations from trusted local gardeners that I can kind of verify what it is that's coming in. And that's been really helpful to fill in some of my gaps too. So then I've been learning seed processing and storage. I've been learning different techniques, threshing and winnowing and things like that. But I don't have any fancy equipment. I don't have any screen. I have screens. I don't have anything that's like the machines that clean seeds, any of that sort of stuff. And then I've been doing the packaging. I've been using paper packaging like you saw. with the envelopes rather than plastic because it's going to be less likely to have mold conditions or things like that. And then I've been looking at, kind of spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, how many seeds am I going to give in a packet, and that's kind of taken a little time to land on. As far as, on the one hand, I knew I couldn't supply as much seed as like a seed company would, but I also wanted to give people enough seed that it's not, just a tiny, little smattering of seeds. So I've tried to hit about 25 in a packet, like as just a rule of thumb. And I don't count them out. For the larger seeds, I might count them out and then kind of say, oh, remember, okay, that's how much that seed looks like, and then just try to keep matching it. And then for the smaller seeds, it's more just eyeballing because you can't, it's just too much to count. But that just kind of helped me kind of feel like, okay, I'm giving them enough. I'm not giving them as much as a seed company, but the seed is free. The seed is very finite. I've run out of quite a few species that have been popular. I couldn't keep the level going. But that's just something that, and we'll talk about that more in this final segment, some of my recommendations to you as well. But those are some of my thought processes and things going on there. Next slide, please. And then, these are just some add-on things. Again, of course, because I'm doing this as a sabbatical, so I was able to do a lot more than the seed distribution. I was actually, the first semester, I went out to people's homes, with social distancing and masks or virtually, and did consultations where folks wanted to add more natives and got into the weeds with them. The kind of a funny pun there, but getting into the details where I would then write up a little report afterward, with specific recommendations for plants based on what they wanted to do and what they already had and what they had for, whether they had drip irrigation or hand watering or, all the different variables that go into that. So that was good. That was a good educational piece, but it became unwieldy. It was it was getting too popular, and it was impacting the rest of the sabbatical. But it gave me some more learning about a lot of the challenges that people were facing in my community with adding native plants. And like I mentioned, I think earlier, I've done some workshops. They are recorded and they're on the website. They are more, specific to gardening in this location, though, for the most part. And I developed plant palettes for folks, to recommend certain species locally, including pallets that can be found in the local nurseries. So I'm not asking people to only grow from seed. I just want to get natives out there any way I can. And so a few of the pallets are just basically ones that you can obtain locally. And then the demonstration gardens have been building on top of amazing gardens that are already at our campuses at Mesa Community College. The top picture is a kind of a reconstructed marsh habitat that have added about 30 plants into that space that you can't see because they're really tiny and a lot of them are tucked under the trees. But they're all ethnobotanical plants that have human uses, and a lot of them also are wildlife valuable plants as well. And then at SCC, there's a big habitat there, and that's just a little tiny piece of it, that I've been collecting seed from, and then also creating field guides for both these gardens. So the idea is people can come on campus, walk around, see the plants close up, see what they look like, and then go into the library and actually, obtain the seeds so they can have a real life experience with the plants. And then with some colleagues, I've applied for a grant for interns. We want to have a couple of paid interns at our locations that are taking over a lot of what I've been doing as on the sabbatical, doing seed collecting, processing, maybe doing some of the educational pieces as well. And that's been really exciting because I've had some faculty, a life sciences faculty and one in geosciences that have come on board, and they're planning to be the supervisors of the interns as I go back to more of my library work. So we're trying to get this really embedded in the curriculum, all the ways that we can. In addition to the interns, we're also looking at how can we get some service learning pieces going outside the internships, and other ways to connect across the curriculum, because I think there's a lot of there's a lot of value, not just to students in sustainability and life sciences, but also even in anthropology, because of the ethnobotanical focus in particular. But there's just a lot of different areas. So that's been exciting as well. Next slide, please. So as far as just checking my time to make sure I'm okay, um, we've given out over 2,800 seed packets, and just since August, which I never thought I'd ever be able to give out that many. That's been amazing, and we've had a lot more social media and web visits than I ever expected. Organizations reaching out to partner, Audubon Society, La Familia Vota. Let me see, the Tonto wants to do some more work with us. A lot of organizations are reaching out, and that all got going with media interest. Somehow, the Phoenix New Times, a newspaper, learned about the project, and then that kind of snowballed into a bunch of other media, and then that really drove a lot of the project and interest. And so, what I've really found is there's been an unmet need for native seed here, and also for habitat at home. Like people seem to be coming out of the woodwork that are interested in doing this, no matter what the size of their space is. There just seems to be a lot of interest, and so I guess this is my lead in to the next segment, which will be about how you can do this habitat, or how you can do something like this in your library, because there probably is a need as well in your community as well. So just pause for questions, and just know I'm going to get into the nitty gritty of how you can do something like this in your library in the next segment. So some of those questions may be kind of covered in there. Let me get the chat back. Oops. Okay, there's the chat. So let me see where I left off as far as oh yeah, that's cool to refer questions about growing um, to a sustainability group. Okay, just looking. Yeah, I've obtained some seeds from Seed Savers as well. They're an excellent organization. Do you have a native plant garden at your library to reference? Yeah, that's one of the ones that the SEC is my home campus. And so we're building up that garden there, and I'll have a field guide to it. Um, if it's poisonous to people or pets, yes, I've included that either way. Um, Recommended books on seed saving. Oh, not off the top of my head, but that may be something I can send out afterward. I know a couple, but I can't think of the titles right off the top of my head. Yeah, Native Seed Search has donated some seeds, and I've used a lot of their resources pretty extensively. I haven't asked patrons to bring seeds back yet because I haven't fully developed that piece of it. I'm going to start creating some guidelines for that and try to get more of that going on with people bringing seeds back, because now that I'll be returning back to my library duties, I won't be able to do as much of that collecting as I've been doing myself personally. So I think that piece will be good to expand. And thanks everyone for including links and things like that. Yes, I have a limit of 3 packets per person per month. Thanks everyone for all the comments and links and questions. Just because of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the last segment here, and then we'll be able to look at any other questions I might have missed or that come up. So now I'm going to talk about how you might do something like this in your library. And I'll talk about each of these pieces, how you can go about researching local native plants and deciding on your targets, questions and decisions about your informational materials, how you could go about obtaining seed, and packaging and processing. Because of time, I won't have really the ability to go into all the other components of starting a seed library, such as displays and inventory and all that other sort of thing. But the Seed Librarians Association has some really good information on that. I'm just going to be really focused specifically on native plants, as opposed to starting a whole seed library from scratch. Next slide, please. So there are several sources here, and I think folks will get this with clickable links. I think after the presentation, I'll just make sure. But the links here are to sources I've used that are really good sources. SciNet is a regional network of herbaria that have botanical information local to your area, and I looked at a few of them. The SciNet one for Arizona, New Mexico is pretty well developed. They even have floras down to the level of county, so I can bring up a list of county, plants that are local to Maricopa County. They also have profiles, they have maps of the plants, they have pictures of the plants. So that's a way to kind of get familiar with what are native plants in my region. Some um, some of the uh, some of the regional networks may not have as many. I was looking at, I think, the southeastern one, and it wasn't as fully developed, but it is definitely a good starting source overall. And then Audubon has where you can enter a zip code and get a list of plants that are native, that are wildlife friendly to your area. So that's another way to start developing kind of a list of natives that you might incorporate. And then the Xerxes Society and Pollinator Partnership have put together regional guides of plants for broad regions for pollinator plants. These are really good, but the regions are broader than sometimes you might want to use. For example, the one for my region has a lot of higher elevation plants too, which won't work here. So you got to just kind of look, not everything in those guides may be suitable for your exact location. And then your local native plant society is a huge, and most states have one, and Canadian provinces as well too. The link there goes to the directory of native plant societies, and they have a lot of information. They produce a lot of educational information, and we'll talk more about them because there's other ways I think they can help you as well. Think about what your criteria might be for including species. What's going to be important to you, and it might be different than what was important to me. It might be really based on what's going to be most easily available to obtain. Or it might be a different emphasis entirely on than what I've looked at. Maybe it's gonna. I can't think of all the different regions and what you might want to focus on, but think about what criteria is meaningful, and that also I'll talk about how you can get involved with different organizations that can also help provide a lot of that information. Um, Actually, that's the next point in the slide. Tapping into your community experts, the community of experts in your area. There's a lot of knowledge out there. There's nonprofit organizations. There's a whole host of them that helped me along the way to get started, as well as folks in higher education. So tapping into that community to help you come up with, what is a list of, native plants that I might really focus on for a native seed library. And you can start small. It doesn't have to be, I had the time to do, to bring in like 45 plants in the first year, but maybe it's going to be, just 5 really high value native species to your area that are easy to obtain or maybe easy to grow from seed. So, um, consulting with experts in your area can help you make those decisions. Next slide, please. And then the informational materials, to me, I really wanted to take away and as many barriers as I could to having folks that are just novice gardeners or maybe just moving to the area to overcome any barriers I could. So if I provided germination information, wildlife value, growing and cultural requirements, and planting season, if I knew that. So if those are things that you can include, they can be helpful because you want to try to, um, have people have a successful experience with growing from seed. And then some of the things that came up a lot for me, and I think somebody asked this in a question, people were constantly asking me, which plants are easy to grow, um, what can be grown in a container, and also, of course, what we talked about as far as any cautions, making sure to let people know about that and that be very visible. Actually, from another seed librarian, she has a stamp, like a red stamp that has, caution or it's a poisonous or something that she stamps right on the seed packets. So it really stands out. Next slide, please. So as far as obtaining the seeds, this is probably going to be the biggest challenge. I have 3, I guess, solutions to offer. And one of them could be this idea of tapping into the local community of experts and partnering with them to see if there might be a group of volunteers that might be willing and interested to collect seed on behalf of the seed library. Of course, getting whatever proper permits or permissions are required. But there's so many different groups that could be interested. In fact, a lot of these types of groups have reached out to me, and I've done different collaborations with them. So rather than, people from the library going out and collecting seed, although if that's something they're interested in can do, you may be able to harness all these different groups that might be able to collect seed. Another idea is recruiting gardeners who already have these plants in their yards to donate seed from their collections. And then, and this I haven't done, I have approached companies for some of the food plant donations I've obtained, but I haven't done it for native seed because like I said, I've been collecting it myself. But there may be a few companies out there that are specializing in seed from your area. I came across quite a few that were specializing in Midwestern kind of prairie um, plants. That was kind of interesting. They're out there, so seeing if you find a company that might have some of these species to donate could be another option. And utilizing all three of these techniques could be a way to obtain seed. And again, you can kind of make it small, start with just a couple of species and grow from there. Next slide, please. So, some ideas about packaging and processing. There might be a possibility of also getting volunteers involved or students if you're at a higher education institution, staff time if that's feasible, to do some of the processing and packaging. You'll need to have some sort of system for organizing and labeling the seed. I have paper bags. I collect the seeds into paper bags. I let them dry for a few weeks, and then they're stored in glass jars in the refrigerator until they can be packaged up. And then the processing, some seeds require a lot more processing than others. And that may be another criteria for you to think about is, well, some of these seeds, the bar is just too high to get through the processing. So maybe focusing on seeds that are, can be more easily processed may be a consideration. Definitely want to do it outside, even with masks, and not because of COVID necessarily for this piece, but because a lot of folks can have allergic reactions from processing the plant material. So even pre-COVID, people were using masks to process seeds. So that's something to think about. There's a lot of different techniques, threshing, winnowing, using screens, hand processing. I've just kind of learned by doing for a lot of it and just kind of figuring out, well, how to work with the different types of seed and what's easiest way to process. But I've not, and I'm pretty trying to be really transparent about this. I cannot process the seeds to the level of a seed company. It depends on the seed. Some of my packets, when you take them out, it's just seed, and they're clean because they're easy to clean. But other seeds are so difficult to separate out, maybe a little bit of the chaff, that there's some chaff in with some of my packets because it would either be not offering at all or offering it that way. That was kind of my choice on some of them because there just was no way that I could process to that level. But that was a kind of a compromise I made, and so that's a recommendation. And actually, I got that recommendation from someone in ecological restoration that works on a lot of seed collecting. I asked her, I was like, how can I, do this without, running into barriers where I'm not going to be able to even do the project at all if I can't clean to that level. And she just really said, make sure it's recognizable as seed. And so that really helped me to think about this a lot. Next slide, please. So I just want to really encourage people to start slow, figure out, working with community partners, what are some high value natives that you can bring in, and then keep growing your partnerships and know that it really will make a difference, especially if you're providing seed of plants that really aren't commercially available. It really will make a difference. And so feel free at any time to follow up with any questions. Those are my two email addresses. And I kind of moved to that quickly because I wanted to make sure I had enough time for questions. So happy to, let me go back to the chat and see what's come up. See where I left off. Have you had any interest from commercial seed companies in bringing any of the varieties? No, I haven't really engaged with them, or that would be a cool thing to take on in the future, but I haven't done that yet. That would be very cool. Absolutely. Is this collection of seeds integrated into the online catalog? So I made a choice not to because I'm at a community college where the public can use the libraries and can check out materials, but in order to do so, they have to go to the registrar, fill out a form, come back to the library, and it's kind of an off-putting process. So I did. If I put the seeds in the catalog, that would have required me to have the public have to go through that process to get the seeds. So I decided at this time, at least, not to do that. And so really, it's just on an honor system. People can take seeds, and there's no record of who took what or anything like that. We just do a weekly inventory, so we keep track of how much is going out the door. Cultural requirements is a kind of a gardening horticulture term for like what type of water or light regime a plant needs. So that's kind of what cultural requirements is. What are the best requirement? What does it need to grow? What is its specific microclimates and things like that? Are you gathering data from surveying the public? So that's something I want to do. That's going to be a next step. I've been pretty overwhelmed just keeping up with what I've done so far, but that's a next step I want to do is actually finding out, well, who's had some successful grow out, a whole host of questions I want to ask. So that's something I'm going to take on next. I've been encouraging people to post on social media with the hashtag when they've had successful grow outs, but only a few people have done that. So I don't know what that exactly means. So I'd like to find out, what experiences are people having with these seed packets once they take them home. Do you include other edibles for the garden? Yes, there is also food plants. We've had a lot of the, traditional lettuce, tomato, and that sort of stuff, all from donations. And so those are offered, but I keep trying to press upon everybody that everything is subject to availability. So you can't come to the seed library and really have an expectation that any particular thing will be there at the because of this is nature, and some of these species I've had all sorts of interesting experiences with, um, trying to collect. I was going to collect, there's a wild tepary bean that I was getting ready to collect on national forest land. And I went back to get them and they had all been trampled by cattle. And I lost this entire crop that I wanted to bring into the seed library that I was really excited about because they're wild tepary beans. Um, so constantly trying to educate folks that what we have is what we have is based on availability. And I made the other decision to keep the profiles of the plants up even if they're not currently available in the seed library, because it's too much work to constantly take down and bring up profiles, or at this time it's been too much to try to keep a public inventory. So how it is right now is people come in and they can get what's available. If they want to really know what's available, they can call ahead, but we haven't produced like publicly available lists yet. It's been too much. That's the next step I want to take on, is trying to figure out how to do that in a way that's manageable. Yes, thank you for all the comments and the links that people are putting in. Um, yeah, as far as COVID, this was kind of a dark, yeah, this was really challenging for me because I had found out that I had been awarded the sabbatical. And then a few months later, as I was getting ready to launch this whole thing, the pandemic began. And so I had to reimagine a lot of it. And a lot of it did change. And it took me a while to find locations that could host me, because actually my campus is still shut down and they haven't been able to host a seed library. But I was able to work with other campuses that had a little more flexibility with how they could get seed out. And so that was really challenging to do that. But then at the same time, I think I might have had more interest because of COVID and all the runs on seeds happening everywhere and everybody gardening. So that's been really, really something for sure. And also, I was going to farmers markets. I should say our local farmers markets were still running under social distancing and masking. So I was going to farmers markets for a while and they gave me a free table and I was able to set up shop and give out seeds and, give little mini consults with people and hand out information. So that really was a great way to reach people at a time when it was really difficult to reach people other than online. Yeah, I had a lot of goodwill from going to the farmers markets. People were like, "What? You're from where? You're what? These are free? Oh, this is the college giving? Wow!" Like there was just a lot of. It was really a goodwill, I think, for the college to be out there doing that. Oh yeah. Oh, that's really cool. That book from Gary Napan. That one I have not seen. I'm gonna have to look for that. It's probably out of print. Thank you for putting that in. There's so many great sources out there when you dig in. The one thing I did have trouble finding though was information on germination. For a lot of these natives, I could not find good germination information. And so I've been doing actually a lot of my own germination trials, trying to grow out a lot of the plants, which has been fun but challenging. And so that's another thing about, kind of trying to engage the community in this is, trying to encourage them to do it, but also letting them know that, native plants don't germinate the same way as our food plants do, you know, because our food plants were bred for that. So that's been another challenge as well. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're going to do with the interns as far as asking biology professors to help. One of the life science faculty, she has a greenhouse, and one of her areas of interest is germination. So if we get the grant and we can get an intern, I think they'll be doing a lot of those trials. And if we can figure out how to germinate a lot of these, we want to publish all of it open access and get the word out, because it's like a lot of this knowledge is in the minds of local horticulturists, and it's not written down. And when they're gone, so's the information. So that is a challenge. Have you seen a change in the invertebrate or bird population yet? Um, I mean, are you asking about in my home garden? Because I can maybe talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a picture of the slide up, but I bought a house about 10 years ago that was just bare dirt, and I've added about 150 species in, and each year I've seen more invertebrates and birds coming. And so that's sort of my "if you build it, they'll come" mantra, as far as that goes, because we're seeing those declines, more globally and things like that. But I think if you build it, what we have that is here will come, and hopefully we can build enough of the habitat in time. I know we're kind of getting close to 11, so I'll stick around for questions as long as folks have questions, but I don't want to hold folks up. I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything that you need to do as far as closing us out.
No, not really, other than I will let everyone know we will send out the slides in a recording, so you'll have all these resources available. Yeah, and I'll try and save the chat questions too, so we can have those that people can refer back to as well.
Oh, that'd be great. So I'm just keep going. There's some more questions coming in, and I'm happy to stick around for any other questions. Someone was asking about an Excel sheet. So for the inventory, it's just shared between myself and the various staff working on it. We use a Google sheet for the inventories. That way we can all kind of see the inventory live. And then I'm thinking about how to make that available, publicly, so people can see in kind of in real time, or at least not in real time, but maybe a weekly update on seeds. I haven't really thought, all of that, how to get into all that without making that overly complicated. If anybody's doing that stuff and has some ideas to share, I'd love to hear how they're managing, that piece with patrons and them having some access to real-time availability, minus being in the catalog. Oh yeah, so Nancy's saying that she uses a Google Sheet to share. So yeah, so that might be the avenue, is just to simply make the sheet publicly available. But then folks just have to know it's not updated to the minute, because we won't be able to probably do a daily inventory. Yes, and happy Earth Day to everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate everybody's interest, and I'd love to hear back if anyone starts up adds some natives to their seed libraries or starts a seed library. I'd love to hear more about what you do. It'd be really exciting for me to see. Yes, hopeful Earth Day for sure. Oh wow, that's great, Sarah, that you guys were just able to get 40 species for your garden. That's amazing. Oh, as far as getting the information for the permit, I I knew I wanted to collect on the Tonto National Forest, so I found their like a generic email address to contact them, and just started writing. And then they've been doing it all electronically. So You just have to figure out, what's the governmental entity that you're approaching. Is it a municipality, city park, or that sort of thing, and then approach the right folks. Some folks aren't used to it. I actually got a permit from the city of Tempe, but it took quite a bit of doing to get a permit there to collect in one of the parks, because they had not done that before. So it's really just figuring out who has the what the jurisdiction, I guess, of the land is, and then who you can contact. And then if it's private land, it should be just permission from the landowner. No, the permit's been free. It's a non-commercial permit. I think if it was a commercial permit, there'd be a charge. So they issue me a non-commercial permit. And for Tonto, they've been asking me, I have to renew it every 2 months, and I have to submit like a seed list, and then the botanist, approves it or not. And it's always been approved. If it was any plants that were threatened or endangered, obviously that would be a no-go. But all my plants, none of them have been in those situations. Permit for each park, yeah, I think it depends. If there's a system of yeah, I don't think that I don't know about the national parks, but at least the national forest, it's by each forest jurisdiction. Oh yeah, that's great hearing about from Cleveland Public Library Marina. They have common milkweed. Yeah, that's a great start, because that's probably really important for the monarchs coming through your area, because you're in Ohio, so that's a big migration, throughway in the Midwest. So adding some more non-natives, maybe that are nectar plants, would be really cool. Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. The collaboration, Tara. Do you think we will get seeds from the plants the first season? It depends on the plant. Some are biennial and they don't bloom until their second year. So it really depends on the plant. And I don't know where you guys are at. Lindenhurst, are you on Long Island by any chance?
Yes, we are.
Yes. Oh,
Yep.
cool. Yeah. I'm actually a Hicksville, New York native. So I saw Lindenhurst and I said, I think that's Long Island.
Yes, yes.
But I wasn't a gardener when I lived there. I was kind of a 20-something that didn't really have any interest in gardening at that point. And so I don't really know much about which plants you have and which might bloom in the first season.
Well, we partner with a local Save the Great South Bay organization, and we purchase it from them. They're a great partner. We're doing programs about native habitat this season, so we're doing well with that. And from them, I purchased, and we are going to plant them in our garden, and hopefully maybe incorporate those in our seed garden. We do have a seed garden, so a library seed started, but not our own, so, but in process that's going. But I hope to do that. Maybe my plants will be able to start that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And if you haven't already, especially with the milkweed, do you use the little bags? Oh, here, I have one right here. These little types of bags to make sure that you capture the seed. Can you still see my screen? Okay.
A little bit, yeah. They might use those.
Yeah.
So,
they're really good for milkweeds, because milkweeds will pop open and the seed will start to blow around. So that might be good to have some of those on hand, that you can bag things
okay,
up.
cool.
Oh, and there's also Tara's in Long Island too. Oh, that's great.
Wow.
Hey, Daniela, I'm sorry about with the time. It was recorded.
Oh, thank you. I just missed it. I'm in Quebec, so I I got confused with the timing, and then I'm like opening the presentation, and I think it's too late. But I thank you. If you can send me the recording, I'm really gonna appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, yes. I'm sorry about that. I've had those same problems with the time zones. In fact, I was checking and making sure I had the right time, because I was a little scared that I was going to be wrong on that. And and Arizona is confusing because it doesn't ever change time, so everything
Yeah.
changes around us. But so yeah, it's
Thank
going to be sent out. It's going to be sent out later today. Thank you,
thank
Daniela.
you.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate everyone. It seems like a lot of folks that joined. It would have been probably nice if I had a chance to find out. I probably should have done a little poll about how many folks had already have seed libraries and things like that. It seemed like we had a really nice knowledge base here already too of folks that are engaged in a lot of these activities. Let me see. Yeah, the farmers markets were super excited about it. In fact, they were just asking me, when are you coming back? And I'm like, I don't think I can because I have to transition out of my sabbatical and figure out how to keep all this going when I'm no longer full time with it. But it is a great, if it can be done, it's a great place to reach kind of a target population that's interested in a lot of these things. Oh, thank you about that book from Napan. I will definitely check that out.
Beth Brand is one of my best friends in the Southwest. We're both in a Council on Botanical and Horticultural Libraries organization.
Ah, very cool.
And she hosted our 2018 or 2019 annual meeting. So I got to see your area here a couple years ago, and it's marvelous.
Mm. Yeah, and the botanical garden is really a great, great garden. They have so many amazing plants and displays. Oh, very cool to have checkout equipment of gardening tools. That's really a cool idea. Yeah, it sounds like that would be great, Melissa, to add some natives into what you already have. You already have a lot of great stuff going on there.
Hi, this is Tom. I'm from Michigan State also. Are most of your plants perennials or annuals or a good mixture?
It's a mixture. I actually have quite a bit of shrubs and subshrubs. Only right now one tree, but I'd like to bring a few more trees in. I have just about 4 or 5 annuals, not a lot of annuals, a couple of vines, and then perennials is kind of a catch-all that I put anything in that didn't seem to fit any of the other categories. And then some food plants and ground covers. And it really was based on, those 4 criteria, and then it just kind of fell out the way it did.
What kind of food plants do you have? I'm curious.
So we have a lot of the, typical things like tomato and lettuce, but we've also I actually just got a donation today of things from Native Seed Search tepary beans and some of the corn varieties that are traditionally grown here. So it's been a mixture, and I try to stick with things that are either desert or desert adapted, or at least try to get folks to use the growing calendar for Maricopa County because it's so different than, most of the rest of the country as far as the grow times for things. Oh yeah, seed swaps. Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to have done, but then COVID kind of impacted that. Oh, Susie is asking a question about how do you keep the tools cleaned? Let me see if I can get the chat to go back up again. I can't, because folks have to they check out the tools. So if Melissa is still here, Susie was asking about how you guys keep the tools cleaned. Do you ask people to return them cleaned, or is that something that you guys have to do? I'm not sure if she's still here though.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was trying to ask. And like, what happens if they come back covered in soil or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, because you wouldn't want all that coming across the carpet and like making a mess. I'm not sure that, I don't think, let me see. I think she's, oh no, she's still here. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm looking at the wrong thing. No, she's still here. Well, I got a little worried that I wasn't going to meet the time. I think we just kind of made it with the presentation, you know, maybe it was a little longer. I think it just made it.
Yeah, no, you were definitely within. Does anyone have any more questions or anything? And you're definitely welcome to unmute your mic. All right. Well, it looks like we might be ready to wrap up. So I will definitely send out a recording and the slides along with a feedback form if anyone has any feedback. So thank you so much for coming, everyone. And I did save the chat as well, so I should be able
okay.
to send out, I'll
Great.
collect the questions to send those out as well.
Thank you very much. It was such an informative program.
Oh, thank you so much for coming.
I'll be emailing you if I have questions.
Yeah, yeah, reach out. I'd love to continue talking about this.
This is great.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your Earth Day. Get out and enjoy it a little bit.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much.